I've got to ask, how was last night's screening? And tell me about just the fun you had in seeing the other films in your category. I know we were just talking about it's an interesting category here.
Yeah.
Late and sexy.
Late night and sexy shorts. When I saw the title of the program, I thought, yeah, great. I love it. It's everything we wanted. And then I saw the films last night and I was like, oh, we look like a family melodrama compared to these films. It was it's a pretty outrageous bunch. And like that being said, I loved every single one of them. Right? I think that oftentimes in the shorts programs, you can have a lot of variation in production value, a lot of variation in quality, and I feel like I loved every single film I saw last night. And I was telling my friends who are coming tonight, because we're talking about how it's a pretty long block. It's a 2-hour block. Yeah. And I didn't even realize it was a 2-hour block until we were leaving and someone mentioned that it had been 2 hours. I was like, I thought it had been an hour of shorts. They were just that exciting.
And none
and
of them
thrilling.
lag. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. So I've got to ask, seeing it on the big screen, seeing that look of it, I mean, the shadows still held up, the look of it. I noticed what you talked about on the red carpet, that the flesh tones, because of what happened with the fires, I noticed that. I was like, oh, wow, he did capture something special. Yeah. How did you feel about just the way it looked and sounded last night?
Well, I loved the way it sounded. This is well, it's not the first time. It's the first time I've seen... So we did an internal screening with the full 5.1 mix, the full surround sound mix. But this is the first time I've seen it with an audience in the surround mix, because our premiere, they didn't have the ability for it, so we just did the stereo mix, which is, fine. But the surround sound, when you have that bass pumping in those moments of like high intense suspense, it's just... it just is really immersive. So it's really wonderful to see that. And the picture looks great. The sound was great. As a filmmaker, I think I will always have notes for myself. I think the day that I don't have notes for a film I've made, I'll just retire then, I guess. But, so I did walk away and think, I wonder if I could still change a few things. But that's my eternal struggle as a perfectionist.
As far as that goes, what did you take from your experience making The Lifeboat into this project? Was there any notes that you took to heart that you needed to do this for this film?
Oh, interesting. So Lifeboat, my previous project, the previous project I did, so that was a really fascinating project because that was in virtual reality, actually. It was made for Jaunt. And which at the time was investing hugely in cinematic VR, which they're no longer investing in, I don't believe. And it was a really different beast because it was all dance. It was entirely dance. So in some sense, and also we were shooting VR during the sunset on a lake, on like a lake bed in the middle of nowhere with a giant piano there. So that was, that was such an insane hustle to get that project done, and to like meet the timing of that project, right? Some lessons I learned from that I then applied to the summer house. Well, planning, right? So in VR, it takes such an immense amount of planning because, I don't really get a live view and I have to hide. So you don't have the screen that you can stare at on set in the same way that you do with regular filming, traditional film. And so you really have to plan things out and rehearse things in a way that is different from what I'm used to working. A lot of times it's easy when you have the camera and the monitor to kind of do things on the fly and be like, oh, that's pretty. Oh, that's pretty. So Lifeboat had to be super planned out to match the space, to make the time of the sunset and all of that. And I think going into the summer house, I did probably some of the biggest the most preparation, the most pre-production that I've done on any project. And I think it does pay off significantly in the framing that you get and the visuals that you get from that film and in the intimacy that we've achieved. The actors felt like they had the space and the time to really embody the characters. So there's a lot that's unsaid in the summer house. There's a lot of things going on with the characters that are not part of the dialogue, right? And so they had a lot of time to really explore that because we had so much preparation time.
it allowed the audience to know that this wasn't a new rendezvous of two new lovers. It was people who'd been together for a while. You felt that from the immediate, just the way they kind of hugged, the holding of the hands was different than just like something new. It's like these guys have been together for a while.
Oh, cool.
And you capture that. I love that part of the movie.
Great.
Yeah. I've got to ask you, we were talking about the houses and that whole community. How did you find these houses? What was your introduction to this area?
So I have been visiting this area for probably the past 10 years. In a prior life, I was a classical ballet dancer. I danced for the San Francisco Ballet. And in that world, it's the arts world that's fully dependent on philanthropic support and donors and sponsors. And the people who love ballet and support the ballet, become friends with the dancers. And there was a particular donor of the San Francisco Ballet School who has a home and is one of the original residents of this really incredible, unique community in Northern California called the Sea Ranch. And she has a guest home up there that I've been visiting for years. I go up in the summer or on my off season and have like a little respite. I go and it's like a creative recovery type of place. And she works in a little community theater up there, and they stage really amazing productions 4 times a year. And I'm always up there just kind of being inspired by her and her community. And when I decided to make the short version of this story, I immediately thought of this house because we had access to it, and because the community already had that really haunting, isolated vibe to it. I mean, that's what it is. And it also had this, I wrote the feature called The Nantucket House, and I'm really intrigued by the conformity of the houses on Nantucket and the requirements to fit. Any new building has to fit into these really strict parameters of architecture and look. They all have to be gray with the white trim, right? And so this community in Northern California, although it's not gray with the white trim, it's very similar in that you have to conform to their architectural design stipulations in order to build a home there. And so all of the homes have that same pitch of roof, the same siding, and they're meant to blend in with nature. And I think it's so interesting when you have such a liberal community that also has this sort of need to conform and be the same, right? And I think that conformity and that requirement to be the same is the enemy of equality and acceptance, right? That's, did I lose my light?
Actually, you're still lit.
Do I look good?
Let's keep going.
Great. So that conformity is the thing that is haunting. That conformity is the thing that's haunting the main character, Greg. That is the thing that caused his father to traumatize him as a child, and not allowing him to be different.
As far as, I know this is more of a proof of concept type feel to it. Can you expand on where we'll go with this story? I know you got into a little bit on the red carpet. I don't want you to give too much away.
Yeah.
But as far as what you can reveal.
Sure, absolutely. So in this version, the main character is bringing his boyfriend to the vacation home, his father's vacation home in the woods that he hasn't been to for years. And it's implied that the father is no longer alive. In the feature, it's slightly different. It's not just a weekend visit. He inherits a house on the island of Nantucket, the house that he grew up in, from his father, whom he hasn't spoken to in 10 years. So he'd never expected to inherit anything from this guy, and then he inherits everything. And he decides with his husband to move from New York City to Nantucket to take on a do-it-yourself remodel on the isolated island of Nantucket. And that's when they unleash the ghosts of his father.
I'm curious, you brought up your dance background. That particular ballet group, y'all travel a bit.
Yeah.
I know in Dallas I think we've had them once. I don't know if you were part of that group, but we have a group, Titus, and they always bring outside entities in.
Yes.
I'm curious, where have you been able to travel as a dancer, or any particular spots that you just... I loved going there. That was an experience.
Well, I've been to Dallas twice, not with the San Francisco Ballet, but with my previous job with the Aspen Santa Fe Ballet.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay,
so I danced
yeah.
with them early on in my career, and we danced in Dallas.
Yeah.
I've been to something like, I think I've been to more than 40 cities in the U.S. dancing, including all the major cities. I've danced in, well, not all of them, but many of them. I've danced in DC, New York, Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I've danced in Hawaii, Central America, a lot of Europe, China. Where else? A lot of places. And actually, I retired. My final performance ever as a classical ballet dancer, because I still sometimes come out of retirement to do contemporary dance projects. But as a classical ballet dancer, my last performance was in Paris.
Oh, wow.
At the Châtelet Theater.
Oh.
And it was really one of the most special places to retire in the place that ballet was born.
Yeah.
It was really special.
Very fitting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a classical piece that was your piece that you loved doing the most? Or not classical, if you had a... You know,
I loved dancing contemporary stuff.
Yeah.
I love dancing the new stuff. I also love dancing classical stuff as well, but I just had a wonderful... For me, it was all about the process of creating something, and I loved stories. So at San Francisco Ballet, I had the opportunity to work with Yuri Posakov, the choreographer in residence there, on several story ballets that he had created, or he remade them. They were like, one of my favorites was actually the Rite of Spring, which is an old Stravinsky ballet. I think it's 100 years old. And for the centennial of the ballet, he made a new version, and I got to play the villain in the ballet.
Oh.
And it was one of the most just exciting things, because you're creating things with your body, you're telling a story, you're referencing the classic, but you're also kind of figuring out how your own voice can apply to this character, to this story, and to this music in this day and time. And I think to me that just always got my my gears going to be a part of that.
Well, thank you. I know that was kind of a side note, but thank you for that. I know I'll be able to send this to my dance people. They'll be like, oh, very cool.
Oh, please do. Absolutely.
So I've got to ask, Gay Chorus Deep South.
Yes.
You have like 4 titles on this film. You're a digital tech, you're a first assistant editor, you're a do-it-all, everything. What did you get to do on the film?
I did do a lot. I did actually a lot. I didn't come in until after they had shot the bulk of principal photography, but I did go back to the South with the production crew to do a lot of the pickup shots. And I did a lot of pickup shots in San Francisco with the chorus. I myself am a former chorus member, and for the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, that specific chorus. And I was the first assistant editor. I was I did the DIT work, the digital tech on set. And then I did...
Were you archival?
I did all of the archival research. So at one point, it was a much more archival-heavy film. I did tons of research into the history of civil rights and the role music has played in civil rights in America. And not just for the LGBT community, but all civil rights, disabled people, women, race. And it was actually one of the most incredible things. This was Gay Chorus Deep South was my first job out of film school. And it was one of the most incredible projects to be a part of, to be able to go into that history of how art has served the civil rights movement in America, and then to allow that to absorb into myself as an artist and as a filmmaker, as a director and a writer. It gave me such a pride to who I was and what my voice is as a filmmaker, and helped me to really understand my own role in bringing representation of otherness to the screen, and being fearless to go against Hollywood, to go against the norm, the heteronormative Hollywood typical films, and to really take genre into a world where we can really apply otherness, have otherness represented. Anyone who feels marginalized can be represented, and their stories can then be told in a way through genre that all people can relate to it, right? In the Summer House, you have a guy who's trying to survive the traumas of his father. He's just trying to survive the night of being tormented by a ghost. And I think anyone can relate to that. You don't have to be gay to relate to that. It just happens to be that for him, it's because he was gay that he was traumatized by his father, right? And I think Gay Chorus Deep South allowed me to really embody my voice as a gay filmmaker, and I'm really grateful for that. I also have 2 uncredited roles. There is some photography in there that I did, which is kind of a joke that I keep playing with everyone, because we needed some shots of the travel, and so I was traveling so much during the film because I was traveling between San Francisco and LA and then going to the South for pickup shots. I was sort of the go-between between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so whenever we needed a shot of travel, I shot all the airport footage or any footage of them, like the shot
all
of them,
the
like
buses,
I didn't shoot the buses, but anything that's airplane related or airport related, I shot with my little iPhone, and it made it into the final film, which is crazy. So I keep teasing that I'm like the uncredited additional photography. And I also did some production design, which I was really proud of, that never made it into the film. Which was, we had tried to shoot some protesting, but then some also positive like pride stuff. So I made tons of posters and pulled a bunch of people together in Charlotte to like stand on a street corner while the film crew went by filming it for B-roll. And then they also shot me for B-roll. We did some like really stylized shots that never made it into the film as well, of like me running through a field with a Confederate American flag, a Pride Confederate flag. I don't know if you've seen this. It's a Confederate flag, but behind it in the background is the Pride flag. And so I'm like running through a field in like boots and like like hilarious sort of like country outfit, and like running through the field with this Pride flag. That footage clearly did not relate so much, but it was a fun moment that the crew all had together.
What was it like seeing it in last night with a packed house? I mean, it was packed. They had the Austin group here. I mean, it was real special. I know a lot of people cried, obviously, but what was it like? I think we were in the same row, like right up front. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, the second row. Yeah. You know, I have been working for a year and a half with a box of tissues next to my computer. I mean, and there are scenes that didn't make it into the film, which are also just tear jerkers. And it has been, you know, some of them are tear jerking for really beautiful reasons, and some of them for not so beautiful reasons. You know, for really heartbreaking reasons. And I think that ever since, you know, we premiered back in April, the few times I've been able to go to the festivals and see it, it's been so validating because I didn't know if I was just a crazy freak for sitting in my like little office crying every day for a year. To really see and feel that response with other people has brought such a different energy. And actually, it wasn't last night, but when we saw it a month ago at Outfest, I told the director, I was like, I cried at a totally different place that time that I had never cried and that I would never have expected to cry. And for some reason, being with that audience, it just broke me down. And it took on a whole new meaning. And I think that that's what's incredible about that documentary is that even on I think it's probably my 50th watch, even on my 50th watch, I'm still learning from it. I'm still absorbing things and understanding things in a different way. And I think that that's what's so incredible about films. When films can achieve that level of depth and truth, I think it's really special.
So I'm going to ask a question about something I think you're working on now. It's IMDb, so who knows if it's reality or not. And titles obviously change, but Matthew, or is there something related to that? Or is it too soon to ask about that?
Matthew is a film that...
I love the O. Like, it's oh, shit.
Well, it's interesting. Matthew was a project that I made my final semester at film school.
Okay.
And we didn't make it in the film department. We made it, me and several of the film students were in a racial diversity class together. And we made it as part of that class, as our final project for that class. And I think it's a really beautiful, powerful film. And the festival liaison for the film school at USC saw it, and she was like, "This is amazing." You know, the film school couldn't push it too much because it wasn't made within the film school. It was made outside in the liberal arts school. But she thought, she kind of pushed me to finish it and put it out into the world. And I ended up taking a sabbatical during all of that, so I didn't really distribute it. so it's actually done. It just hasn't seen the light of day. So,
well, hopefully now you'll push to do it.
Maybe one day someone will really love to see it. It's not pleasant. It doesn't end on a happy note. It doesn't end with this idea of us being in a better place racially. It doesn't end with the characters, finding a way to be less racist. It deals more with my own upbringing in the South and how I was not born racist, and that subtle racism was sort of instilled in me by my elders unintentionally and unwantingly. And that's really what the film deals with. And I think that audience members who watch it really resonates with them. I think in a distribution element, I think it's not so easy to sell because it's not so easy to sit through. And I think we saw that in the Academy Awards.
Yeah.
Green Book. It's a beautiful film, and I love representation for representation's sake, but they whitewashed, and so great representation, but to win best film for a film that was still whitewashing and in a place that we were in the 90s is heartbreaking, really. And I can only imagine how Spike Lee felt in that moment. Because the Black Klansman was powerful and uncomfortable and in your face and real.
Yeah, he didn't hold back.
Because that's real. That's almost the great thing about documentaries is you can tell stories that are sort of unbelievable in the fictional setting, right? Sometimes nonfiction is more outrageous and unbelievable than fiction. So yeah, hopefully one day Matthew finds the light of day. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Well, other than Matthew, you sort of hinted at this on the red carpet, but what are you working on now? What is down the pipeline for you?
So my primary focus for the next year is to get the summer house made into a feature, the Nantucket House, and that is my driving force, plowing through. In the meantime, I'm doing a lot of fun little music videos, and I've picked up a few little Instagram promos, which are really fun. They're really short, 15-second little things, and they're just amazing exercises in storytelling, right? How to make a punch in 15 seconds, right? A 1-2 punch. It's like kind of beautiful. And the standards are super high now for Instagram to catch your attention to stop you from scrolling. It really requires a lot of thinking, and so I'm doing a few of those things to pay the bills, and then really focusing on the Nantucket House.
Well, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see that transition from the summer house and that suspense we had there into another suspenseful area, and I want to see that little painting turn into the big painting you're talking about. I can't wait to see that.
Absolutely.
So Luke, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for bringing this short here, and I hope tonight is as much fun as last night was.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me.